Hello, welcome to our podcast. My name is Mateusz Laszczkowski, and I'm here with my colleague Helena Pacer at the Department of Anthropology at the University of Warsaw to talk about my article that's coming out in this issue of City and Society. The article is called Scraps, Neighbors and Communities, and it looks at an old apartment block in the capital city of Kazakhstan, Astana. I know that Helena has prepared some questions for me. I'm all yours.
Okay, so Mateusz, my first question would be, could you describe how do people make sense of place in this block of flats community in Astana? How do they create their own locality? What happens there? What was the problem that made you to write the article?
This is the block where I lived during fieldwork for almost a year, and I guess you could say in this article I'm looking at something that you might call a local community, but then this really gets tricky when you look at what kind of a group of what kind of phenomena you're dealing with. The makeup of the residents of this block had changed significantly between basically the collapse of the Soviet Union and the privatization of apartments, of housing that followed in the early 1990s, and then the period of my fieldwork almost 20 years later. A lot of long-standing residents had left, migrated, moved abroad, and they were replaced by various kinds of newcomers, many of them rural migrants, flowing into Astana, mostly to take up employment in the construction sector during the construction boom that followed in the wake of the relocation of Kazakhstan's capital to the city. So that was one major change that had happened in the bloc before my arrival. And then a lot of other changes that got kind of intertwined with that. Fundamentally, the privatization and commercialization of space, not only apartments but also the courtyard, the shared spaces, basements, hallways, staircases, things like that. That all of those places, all of those spaces used to be collectively owned and collectively managed. And with commercialization, it had suddenly become unclear who was responsible for those spaces, what people's relationships to those spaces were. At the same time, importantly, a similar crisis occurred also within the municipal authorities, planning offices. Basically, the infrastructure of the block and the adjacent courtyard went kind of abandoned by the authorities. And what I'm looking at in the article specifically is how a group of long-standing inhabitants, a kind of shifting group all the time, informally organized to patch up the infrastructure of their apartment block and courtyard using whatever resources were handy.
So in your article you start out with painting this picture of a group standing around a set of different pipes and different things. So what is important and what is your starting point is the materiality of the block. As you call it, the scrappiness and the scraps. And as you said, there is this portrayal of this group which is rather active towards these material objects, but you also give agency to the material objects themselves. So what are scraps for you and scrappiness, and why is it an important concept? How would you describe these two concepts that you use?
Yeah, thanks. This is an important question. Thank you. I think it's quite central to my argument in this article. Basically, this article is an ethnography of placemaking, but in anthropology there have been various ways of looking at places. A lot of the anthropology of place is heavily influenced, is heavily focused on the human subjective experience of place. All those phenomenological approaches that look at how people attach meanings or inscribe meanings in places. Yes, they argue that places are also fundamentally material assemblages. Basically, I argue that you can't analytically, you can't separate the material from the imagination. And so, the processes of the making and unmaking of places involve the agency of multiple human subjects, the residents of a place, but also a lot of other people operating from other locations, near and far, interwoven with the agency of material things. And those bits and pieces of the infrastructure are themselves actants that partake in the processes of making place, as that viscerally felt kind of localized structure of feeling as well. Kind of feelings are kind of formed, affects are formed through people's interactions, not only among themselves, not only with other people, but also with the material makeup of place. And then the concept of scraps becomes central, because what it adds to our analysis of material agency, not only in placemaking but in social processes and social processes in general, is a dimension of conflictuality, of this unceasing dynamics. Material actants do not just neatly connect and add to one another to to constitute things. They're also inherently at loggerheads one with one another, I guess, very often, and this leads to tensions within emerging social forms, say communities, say places. And this can contribute to the unmaking of social aggregates, places included.
So you write about all the agency of people and how they take the fate of the community somehow in their hands, and what they do on the very basic everyday level by building small fences, getting these scraps from the basement and doing something with them, by trying to connect different levels, trying to connect with the local government, with the main ideas circling. But among all this positive picture of people doing something together, later you also come up with this unmaking, as you said, and you also describe something of this feeling of, as you write, being abandoned and lost. And I think it is very much connected to the processes of transition, which you describe in the article, of the transition of the capital, Astana, of the place as these people see it. They are not of the new city, they are of the old city that was before, and that it is not there anymore. So how does this connect, and how does this play in your analysis? And so how much is it regaining the agency by people, or how much is it a kind of ambiguous situation when you don't know what will be the outcome within all these small and big forces and between all the actors present?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't call that ambiguous. I would just call that outright contradictory. Which, by the way, I believe is the normal human condition, the normal condition of social life. You see, the thing is...
Yeah, especially in modernization processes and
exactly,
development. There is always strong conflicts and contradictions in that.
Yeah, definitely. I would probably suppose it's even more general than that. But to answer your question specifically, the thing is, scraps, by their very nature, enable people to do certain things, enable people to, they even kind of give people ideas on how to reconnect things that initially were not supposed to get connected, right? So scraps are inherently creative, and thus they create opportunities for people to increase their agency, to exercise agency in new ways. But on the other hand, because of what I said before, this kind of partial nature of scraps, this conflictuality inherent to them, they also constrain that agency, and they resist is perhaps not exactly the word I'm looking for. They defy agency. They only let you do that much, or they let you do it only for this long, and then they break, right?
How much are these processes only characteristic to these post-socialist spaces? Because I would say that it actually would be better to describe it. It could be anywhere, because what you describe are just the processes of building and decay, or these making and unmaking, which I think happen all the time, and in urban environments especially. Not only in post-socialist spaces, but in any other post-development, pre-development. You could see it in different areas. So, how much is your argument here strong, or would you push it maybe further to say it about urban spaces? And you're right about urbanism there. So, if you could.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, there are certain factors that are specific to that particular setting, or to post-socialist, post-Soviet settings in general. And then, of course, I mean, something that we didn't say before, and I think which is important, is that Astana is quite a special place. After the capital relocation in the late 1990s, the city has undergone an absolutely unprecedented construction boom, with an entire vast new part of the city being added just next to the Soviet era city. And what I think, and that has attracted a lot of attention also from scholars. Whereas I think it's interesting to look at what happens in those other parts of the city, because that's always related.
I could find very similar cases probably, or some cases in which I could use your framework as well in Manila, in the developing areas, or areas which are undergoing different discussions between different forces, and then the material objects there are also very much the central or focal point of discussion and all of this conflict. So I think it would be it can be very good to analyze different urban spaces worldwide.
I think that scrappiness is the general condition of human relations with the material environment, or the general condition of the material environments. Perhaps Astana is special for making this so visible, so palpable. But it's definitely a much broader thing. Perhaps it's a thing about modernity. But it's definitely not limited in its relevance to what we call the post-socialist world. It's definitely much broader than that. Okay, thank you, Hala.
Thank you, Mateusz, and have a good read. We encourage you to look to the article and use it in your own research.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.